How can technology businesses really help accelerate this resurgence to try and bring more manufacturing back to the United States? We've got a lot of work to do. The demand is there, but we need the technology to meet the needs of these companies.
It's an interesting article that came across, talking about China and the U.S. faces a reckoning over trade disruptions in 2021. This is supply chain law firm forecasts a rise in reshoring automation as businesses look to trim dependency on the manufacturing powerhouse. We have covered on the show about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, and that the way to do that is through automation. And how can technology, some marketplace business models, some platform business models, but all of them technology businesses, maybe not all platform businesses, but all of them technology businesses. How can technology businesses really help accelerate this resurgence to try and bring more manufacturing back to the United States? We covered earlier in another recent episode that 75% of the new sellers on Amazon are Chinese sellers, right? These are Chinese factories. 75% of the new sellers on Amazon, Chinese factories. We've got a lot of work to do to try and bring manufacturing back to the United States. So this article I thought was pretty interesting, and there's a few takeaways in here that I wanted to highlight. Process of reestablishing import and export routes with China will be paused because of the new year. And it talks about the Biden administration trying to figure out what these policies are going to be. And that ultimately is going to bring more uncertainty to supply chain as it relates in China. And that only puts more pressure on U.S.-based manufacturers or importers that are relying on supply chain in China to make some decisions here, right? Closing out here, I thought was pretty relevant. So these combined issues make it harder to predict Chinese policies in 2021 than in past years. U.S. companies remain dependent on the nation as the sole supplier of certain goods made nowhere else, such as technology components like LED, computer, and television screens. In response, some businesses are trying to shift production to other nations such as Taiwan and Vietnam in a China plus one strategy. Well, that makes sense, right? Cheap labor. How can I get cheap labor? Not in China. Let me go to Vietnam. But experts say those smaller nations often lack sufficient logistics infrastructure, such as deep water ports, rail networks, and warehouses. Oh, okay. Interesting. They also simply don't have the manpower to replace China's vast labor force, which include 4 times the U.S. population. Okay. Instead, a more likely solution would be for U.S. companies to replace their trade routes through reshoring, the relocation of foreign supply chain facilities back to the U.S., and here's the key part, and increased investments in automation. So I think this is a big opportunity. We've talked about how I think we see this happening in medical supply manufacturing. There's a lot of emphasis. You got a lot of forces really driving huge urgency to bring more medical supply and medical device manufacturing back to the United States, particularly with these more regulated products. You have electronic and non-electronic medical supplies and medical devices. So you tend to have higher margins, and that could make it a little bit easier, both from an economic standpoint, but also a political standpoint, right? Medical, you want to have that back and have that be less of a dependency on China. So there's a lot of forces why I think automation, in particularly that medical supply, medical device arena, is going to be a big bright spot. But more broadly, right, and what this article is getting at is more broadly, it's a lot on the table, right? A lot of things are on the table to say, if you can have strong startups, it's going to come from the tech startup community that's really going to drive this, right? In making material advancements in automation technology, manufacturing automation technology, that if we can see that capability there is the demand. The demand is there, but we need the technology to meet the needs of these companies, right? Maybe net, the cost is still a little bit higher when you factor in it being manufactured in China and then shipping it across an ocean, not a small ocean. But still, net, even if it is a little bit higher, I still think you see a lot of U.S. manufacturers opt for a slightly higher option that is locally made with more stability, less uncertainty, and more goodwill from a marketing and a branding position. Then you kind of abstract yourself out of saying, well, what happens if we get back into another tariff war or this or that, right? All that kind of policy uncertainty. You just sidestep all of that. And so there is a price to pay. It's not we're not talking a 20% margin price to pay that you would then reshore back to the United States. But I think there is some margin that companies would be willing to tack on if you have the rest of the automation there and the capability to do scaled manufacturing here as opposed to there. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.